We're going to begin our service with the recitation of a series of psalms composed by King David in the book of Tehillim, Sefer Tehillim, the book of Psalms, which are appropriately read at the funeral of a fine person, an upstanding person, as was Mrs. Flora Isenberg, Frada Rachel bat Aryeh ve'edel. I begin with Psalm 1. Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach bi'atzat risha'im, uvderech hata'im lo amad, uvmoshav leitzim lo yashav, ki im b'torat Adonai chavtso, uvtorato yegeh yomam v'layla, v'haya ke'et shatul al palgei mayim, asher piryo yitain be'ito, v'alehu lo yibol, v'chol asher ya'aseh yatzliach. Lo chen harisha'im, ki im kamot asher titvenu ruach. Al kain lo yakumu risha'im ba'mishpat, v'chata'im ba'adat tzadikim, ki yodeh Adonai derech tzadikim, v'derech risha'im toved. Happy is the one who has not followed the counsel of the wicked, nor stood in the path of sinners, nor sat in the company of the scornful. Rather, that one's delight is in the Torah of the Lord, meditating in God's Torah day and night. And they will be like a tree planted by streams of water, that yields its fruit in season, whose leaves will not wither, and whatever that one does prospers. Not so the wicked, who are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked shall not survive judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord loves the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked is doomed. Tehillim Tedvav, Psalm 15. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai, mi yagur b'ohalecha, mi yishkon behar kodshacha. Holech tamim ufoel tzedek v'dover emet bilvavo. Lo ragal al lishono, lo asa l're'ehu ra'ah, v'cherpa lo nasa al krovo. Nivza be'enav nimas v'yet yirei Adonai yichabed, nishpa li'ara v'lo yamir. Kaspo lo natan b'neshach, v'shochad al naki lo lakach, ose'ela lo yimot le'olam. Mizmor leDavid, a song of David. Lord, who may sojourn in your tent, who may dwell on your holy mountain. One who walks in purity, does what is righteous, and speaks the truth from the heart. Who has no slander on the tongue, nor has done harm to a fellow, nor cast disgrace toward a neighbor. In whose eyes a contemptible person is repulsive, but who honors those who are in awe of the Lord, who swears truthfully even to personal hurt, and never retracts, who does not lend money on interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. One who does these things shall never falter. Now I'm going to read in the Hebrew, Tehillim Chaf Gimel, Psalm 23, and then invite everybody who would wish to recite the English translation, which you'll find in the inside of the front cover in the booklets. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bin ot desha yar bitzeni al mei menuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begates al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umish'antecha hema yinachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai. Dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Achto v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shafti beveit Adonai li'orech yamim. Please join with me, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'm now going to chant the Eshet Chayil, which is the final chapter in the book of Proverbs, Sefer Mishlei, which was written by King David's son, Solomon, known for his wisdom. And in this acrostic, the prototype of the ideal traditional Jewish woman really is spelled out. And I'm going to share some of the key verses in the English translation. And I think that you will see how readily applicable they are to the lifestyle and the life led by Flora Isenberg. Eshet Chayil mimtza verachok mipnim mimichra batach balev bala v'shala lo yachsara Gimelatu tov velo ra kol yemei chayeha darshat semer ufishtim vatas bechefetz kapeha Haita kioniot sahocher mimerchak tavi lachma vatakom bio laila vatiten teref leveta v'choklin aroteha Zamimasa devatikachehu mi pricha panatakarem chagravios matneha vatametz roteha tamakitov sachra lo yichbev alayla neira yadeha shilcha vakishor v'chapea chufalech Kappa parsaliani veyadeha shilcha laevyon lo tira leveta mishale kichol beita lavu shahanim marvadim astala shesh viar gaman levusha no dabasharim bala beshiftoim ziknei aretz Sadin astavatim kora v'chagor natna laknanios v'hadar levusha v'tischak liyom acharon piha padcha b'chachma v'torat chesed al leshona tzofia halichot beita v'lechem atzlut lo tochel kamu vaneha v'yashruha bala v'yehalila Rabot banot asu chayil v'atalit al kulana Sheker achein v'hevel hayahofi Isha yirat Adonai Hi titalal Tinula mipriyada V'haleluha v'sharim maseha Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor who can find far beyond pearls, is her worth. Her husband's heartfelt trust is in her, and he shall lack for nothing. She bestows good upon him and never harm all the days of her life. She spreads out her palm to the poor and extends her hands to the destitute. Strength and splendor are her raiment. She cheerfully awaits the last day. Her mouth is opened with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She oversees the ways of her household and partakes not of the bread of laziness. Her children arise and praise her husband, and he lauds her. Many daughters have accomplished well, but you surpass them all. Grace is false and beauty is vain. A woman in awe of God, she should be praised. Give her the fruits of her own hand, and let her deeds praise her in the gathering places. Now going to call up members of the family who are going to share some memories, divrei shevach, and also words of praise of their beloved mother and grandmother. First, we call upon Jeremy.
Good morning. My name's Jeremy, and I'm one of Flora's, or as we referred to her, Dodi's, 5 grandsons. There's so much to her life that I'm quite clear I won't be able to adequately describe, so I'll leave that to my uncle and mom who are speaking next. That said, there's one part of her life that I feel uniquely qualified to discuss, her role as a grandma. I thought about a few stories to shed light of what she was like as a grandma. When we were young, once a week she and my grandpa would come over to watch Elliot and I while our parents worked. We would always watch The Simpsons, which she didn't care for, And for dinner, she'd typically bring a big pot of kapustache or have another one of her specialties, a cream cheese and cracker party. She also had a unique sense of humor that wasn't as overt as others. When Elliot was a Boy Scout, we'd go to his meeting, and at one of them, one side of the room would shout, "Hey," while the other room would shout, "Straw." No, this still doesn't make sense to me, even as an adult. But either way, throughout the subsequent months after that, she'd randomly shout, "Hey," just to see if Elliot would reply with straw, which he did every time. A summer or two after that, she invited us all to the pool at her complex, and she showed up wearing a towel attached to a bobby pin. I don't think we swam for 20 minutes because we were all laughing way too hard. My grandma was a reliable and constant presence in all of our lives. I genuinely can't think of a moment, big or small, in Elliot, Zach, or my life that she didn't have a front row seat to. A clear representation of her role in our lives and in our home was surfaced actually a couple weeks ago. My parents are redecorating their house, and they tore down the mirrors that lined all of our walls. On the bare walls were the names of my brothers and I that we must have wrote when we were young. And directly beside our names was Grandpa Arnie's and Grandma Dodie's. Not only were they clearly present for what seemed to be an ordinary moment in our lives, but they clearly joined in on the fun and wrote their names too. My grandma was a woman of strong faith, attending the shul that my grandpa, quite literally, helped build. They proudly attended services in their seats that was third row in the front, and had their names engraved to the backs of the seats. I don't think there was anything that meant more to her than if a family member would surprise her and attend the services with her. Aside from the myriad religious holidays or traditions that she held, such as lighting my grandpa's menorah on Hanukkah or making Homentashen, she created other traditions. At any family gathering we had, she'd either make her famous apricot cheesecake or buy our favorite, pistachio cake. But most importantly, when she brought pistachio cake, she always went out of her way to make sure that Elliot, Zach, and I got pieces with the most pistachio crust, which was, arguably, the best part. As we got older, so did our relationships. Zach routinely called her on Sundays. It was clearly the highlight of her week, as she would really never leave the house on a Sunday within a 7-hour period in the hopes that he might call. He also would prank call her some of those times, which partially drove her nuts, but she predominantly loved that and got such a kick out of their relationship. I feel so fortunate for the many memories I shared with her as an adult. Her favorite musical was Phantom of the Opera, so we saw that several times together. For her 90th birthday, she had multiple meaningful surprises: a trip to New York, seeing Phantom on Broadway, which was a dream of hers, and most of all, the Isenbergs meeting us to spend the day together. A couple of years prior to that, my mom and I got second row seats to the show in Chicago. During the climax of the show, her cell phone rings. She's too entranced with the show to even notice, and I swear the leads looked down at her to tell her to turn it off. I forgot to mention, the show was on a Sunday. It'll remain a mystery if it was a real or a prank call, but it was certainly a rare missed one from Zach. Aside from Phantom, her favorite movie was Gone with the Wind. I realized a couple years ago that I hadn't seen it, and before I knew it was an almost 4-hour movie, I suggested we should watch it. We honestly had to stop halfway through because she was too excited, she cried the entire time, and she subsequently told me every major plot point that was about to unfold. It didn't matter what we were doing or watching, as we always enjoyed each other's company, and I'm grateful that we had that kind of relationship. Some of her favorite activities included listening to her radio in the morning, playing Mahjong, and reporting to my mom and I on her winnings for the day, reading any suspense novel she can get her hands on, watching her favorite judge, Judy, or attending any event with the Couples Club, a group of friends that my grandparents had that spanned nearly 7 decades. As dementia and Alzheimer's set in, I had always wondered if the person I knew would fade away entirely. To my surprise, she was still there, but if you looked hard enough. If you brought her favorite dessert, a chocolate long john with sprinkles, without fail, she'd pick up each and every sprinkle with her index finger and eat each one before the bag could be thrown away. If you joined her for a meal, no matter the time of day, she would insist on having a hot, hot, hot cup of coffee. If you showed her any picture of her 7 great-granddaughters, a noticeable smile would come across her face. She'd happily sit and want to look at them for the remainder of the visit. Actually, about 3 weeks ago, I was visiting her, and I suggested we walk the halls of where she lived. I figured, sure, we'll get in a lap or two. 6 laps later, I was ready for a break. We rounded the corner, she pulled at my sleeve, and she said, "Come on," as she proceeded to keep on walking. Even until the end, she had a zest, perseverance, and energy unlike most 97-year-olds. Family and religion were two of the most important values to her. Because of that, you can imagine my fears that I initially held when thinking about her reaction to my sexual orientation. I had faith in her, faith that despite generational differences or preconceived notions she might have had, her love for me, the closest in our relationship, would supersede anything else. And I was right. In the 10 years since I'd been with my husband, Devin, there was never even the slightest of issues or barriers between us. She welcomed him much like she did with Stacy, Miriam, Stacy, or Megan. The unconditional love that she demonstrated toward me will be the thing above everything else I shared today, will be the thing that stands out to me most when I think about the person she was and the values she held. Not many people live to be 97 and have the full life that she had. I feel so fortunate to have her consistent and stable presence and rock in our lives for as long as we did, and have no doubt her memory and legacy will live on. Thanks.
I'm going to try to do this. I don't know if I'm going to get through it. 97, a truly beautiful life. I loved my mother. I truly loved my mother. She was my friend, a truly lifelong friend, my confidant, and my most loyal supporter and cheerleader. On a daily basis, she was my first phone call before hanging up my coat when I got to school, and the last phone call at night to say hi and talk, and when she was older and no longer had my dad, to make sure that she was okay. The value I place on friendships, on being a good friend, an involved friend, and doing the right things for others, I learned from her by example, and from the tens of thousands of hours we spent talking about issues, controversies, and right and wrong, and foolish and wise behaviors. My mom was right there, opinionated, adamant. But we enjoyed each other, and we enjoyed our conversations. I learned from her. I learned from the exchanges I had in responding to her. She was sometimes challenging and frustrating, but far more often fun and so rewarding for both of us. Mom and I truly enjoyed each other and always ended our conversations with, "I love you." We were quite the dynamic team. I was the lucky one to be blessed with such a wonderful mother. She was a beloved wife, mother, mother-in-law, grandmother, and the most excited great-grandmother. She went by many names, depending on the generation who was talking to her. It was Flora, Flo, Grandma Flo, Dodie, Dodes. And when she became the old lady, she loved being called the old lady. She loved being included in every aspect of our lives. My mother came from humble beginnings, with my grandmother, Ida, becoming a widow at a very young age. My mother had a very strong work ethic. The Monday following her graduation from Thule High School, she went right into her dream job, a librarian at the Chicago Public Library. She met my dad at a dance. They married in 47, had my brother in 49, didn't waste any time. I was born in 53. I vaguely remember moving into our single new home in Skokie. With only 2 twin beds and a 6-drawer dresser, I shared a room with my grandmother. Family came first, and as a child, I thought everybody's grandmother lived with them. My dad started a cement business, and he hired her as his bookkeeper. She didn't have a computer. She didn't have QuickBooks, just basic arithmetic, bookkeeping, and accounting. And she was and remained very good at it, and she was proud of it. She was subsequently hired as a bookkeeper for various insurance companies for many years. For all of her adult life, my mother cared for her mother, my grandma, who lived with us. I suspect that Mom gave my dad no choice. And as I said, Mom was smart, opinionated, straightforward, and stubborn. But her main goal was to move to Buffalo Grove, and she convinced my dad that that was the right choice. And they did. With Mom and Dad living in Buffalo Grove, I felt like I won the lottery. My parents were 10 minutes away, and we all loved it. Life was good. They were available. They were present for any family event. They babysat. We went on lots of ice cream outings and lots of cream cheese and cracker parties. Both my mom and dad truly loved being so close to their grandchildren. My mom loved Frank Sinatra, but her idol was Clark Gable. Gone with the Wind was her favorite. She had Gone with the Wind books, puzzles, pictures, everything related to her idol. She even glued a puzzle we had given her and proudly displayed it in her den. She also loved the Broadway show Phantom of the Opera. I find it so ironic that after a 35-year run, Phantom is closing on Broadway this February, which is my mom's birthday. I guess all great things eventually come to an end. My mom loved her Mahjong, knitting, crocheting, and needlepoint. It was her pleasure to adorn every family member's home with multiple pieces of her craft. Every stitch she made was full of love for every lucky recipient. She was an avid baker of a select but cherished assortment of baked treats, chocolate chip cookies, parfait pies, spice bars, Hamantaschen, and her famous mandelbread. She loved coffee, only hot coffee. Give her a hot cup of coffee and a chocolate long john, and you were forever friends. My mom had three main loves in her life: her family, the synagogue, and the Club Futures, which was a group of high school friends who remained close friends for over 60 years. They supported each other through college, wartime, the draft, personal challenges, and surgeries. They met once a month for dinner, poker, which I think they cheated, and desserts. The Paulos, Rubensteins, Blocks, Millers, Meltzers, Halperns, and the Isenbergs exemplified the true meaning of friendship. From this group, my mother was the last one standing. She loved her synagogue, and she was so proud to be Jewish. As founding members, my parents participated in hundreds of events. My mom was the Sisterhood president and took the job seriously. Her responsibility made her beam with pride. Friendships with the Lappings, the Feeders, the Bergers, the Dubershins were a cherished part of her synagogue family. These friendships lasted 50 to 60 years. Again, my mom was the last one standing. In my eyes, God saved the best for last. Her number one love, her family. My mom cherished her family. She had 2 children, a daughter-in-law, a son-in-law, and then 5 grandchildren, all boys. Adam, Danny, Elliot, Jeremy, and Zachary. She loved you so much. Though Adam and Danny lived far away, it never lessened the love she felt for you. And then she was blessed with 7 great-granddaughters: Jordan, Meira, Elana, Taylor, Morgan, Avery, and Alex. Wow, lots of precious pink. After losing my dad 18 years ago, Mom became the senior citizen Energizer Bunny. She was proudly present at every event that the kids had participated in. She was most consistently a proud grandmother. Everyone knew her. She would smile with joy when people she did not know came up just to say hello. Turning 90, we surprised her with a trip to see Phantom of the Opera in New York. It was a magical weekend. Giddy with excitement, that 90-year-old woman zoomed through Times Square. At times, it was hard for us to keep up with her. She was beyond excited, so appreciative, grateful, and totally shocked when on Sunday, my brother and his family met us at Max Brenner's Chocolate Factory. Truly the icing on the surprise. And being with Jordan, her first great-granddaughter, was picture perfect. It's very sad that my mom never got to know her other babies. She would have loved it. On that 90th birthday, I played the best prank on my mom. I contacted all my friends, many of you here, adult children, all my coworkers, anyone I can think of, the dentist, the doctors. Birthday cards came in the mail. My mom received over 158 cards, the overwhelming majority of strangers she never knew. People wrote things about her that she didn't even know I had told. She was so excited. After then, she caught on. She started waiting for the mail girl to come every day for the rest of the mail. It was a fun way to celebrate her birthday, and those cards were adorned all over her living room. But sadly, later that year, I noticed changes in her behavior that concerned me, and I remembered my dad saying to me on his deathbed, "Please take care of your mother." I always knew that was my calling, my responsibility. I sold her car, and with the help of my brother, we moved her to Gidwitz. She was not happy. 6 months later, she broke her hip, and her behavior significantly worsened. 14 months later, I was given 4 days to move her to a memory care facility. It was a nightmare. I didn't even know what a memory care facility was. But with the help of Max, my kids, Ellen and Gail Lang, we selectively picked up what we could from the Gidwitz apartment, and I moved her to Springs Memory Care in Vernon Hills, just minutes from our house. Moving under these circumstances was one of the hardest days of my life. I went into my car and cried, but in retrospect, her stay and care she received at Springs was without a doubt the best decision I could ever have made for her. I have so many people here to thank on my mom's behalf. My wonderful circle of friends, and you all know who you are, who consistently asked about my mom. If it was the end of a phone call, a text, just a hug, you have no idea how that warmed my heart. In Springs Memory Care, in Vernon Hills, Julie, Carol, Sue, Bianca, Yolanda, my guardian angel hospice care nurse. You treated my mom with love, compassion, and dignity. Her home for the last 3 years was filled with safety, love, and warmth. And lastly, and lovingly, I thank my family. Words cannot express my deep and unforgettable gratitude for your loyalty, compassion, and love towards Dodie. This was the true meaning and value of family, and she knew it. Elliot and Stacy, my mom loved coming to your house, except for those dogs. She loved being called the old lady and being with lively, adorable Taylor and Morgan. Stacy, she and I both appreciated your genuine concern and wise medical advice. Elliot, she was so proud of you. She was in awe of your intelligence, your wit, but very nervous about the dangers inherent in policing. You now have a new angel watching over you. Jeremy and Devin. Dodie was so happy that you found each other and built such a beautiful life together. Devin, she enjoyed your humor, and you knew she loved being with Avery and Alex. Every time you would bring her to the facility, she would continually marvel at Avy's hair, and she'd look at me and say, how come Alex doesn't have any hair? And Jeremy, your hundreds of trips to visit her when she lived at her condo, and then at Gidwitz, and then at Springs, bringing her McDonald's Sundays and Long Johns, sitting with her, taking laps with her walker, and she was sometimes faster than you, were so appreciative. She loved all of you, and I believe the feelings of love to remain inside her, even though she no longer remembered who you were. Zach and Megan. Zach, you knew how to humorously press her buttons. Your highly riveted debates with her on numerous topics always provided lots of Rose entertainment. In your weekly prank phone calls, I think she looked forward to them. She would have been so proud of your accomplishments. She was a true fan of yours. Unfortunately, she did not get to meet Megan, but I suspect and hope a bright ray of sunshine will shine upon your wedding in September. Both Dodie and Arnie will be smiling. Lastly, Max, you are the epitome of wonderfulness. My mom loved you like a son, and you truly earned that title. Not just the many practical things you did to help her, as you earlier did for my dad. The compassion, concern, the respect and love you showed for Mom, indispensably so for me with love and grace, and helping me navigate through the journey was heaven sent. You are truly wonderful, and now I guess I have to publicly say my heartfelt thanks. I love you. Mom, rest in peace. I will miss and love you forever. And remember, you will always have a special handprint on my heart. I love you and give my love to Dad.
I recently remembered lines from the song Nights of White Satin by the Moody Blues. The lines were, "Letters I've written, never meaning to send. This is something I've written a long time ago, never knowing when I would need it." There are many symbols that are associated with my profession: the bowl of Hygeia, a mortar and pestle, and most familiar, which we all know, the RX symbol. From the Latin, RX means to take or make thou art, indicating the recipe, both the ingredients and quantities to use. The structure is well known to both pharmacists and those in the kitchen. In many households, the kitchen is central to the family. I want to share a few of the kitchen stories. To start, I must confess, as a child, I was convinced that magic happened in the kitchen. I could never figure out how that boiled egg got into that meatloaf. And it mostly only happened on Monday. Like chicken on Friday or a holiday. Was that a commandment that was decreed by someone years ago? I don't know. I do know in this case that I would call this Mother's Monday magic meatloaf. I very distinctly remember my mother making apple pie. I still remember the smell of apples and cinnamon cooking in our kitchen in Skokie. I also remember that every time my mother made that apple pie, she would always find a way to make me a pie crust as a cookie just for me. It never failed that my mother had an empty 5-pound can of Maxwell House coffee in the house. Sometimes she had 2. I never thought my parents drank that much coffee. However, every time I returned to college, either to DeKalb or to New York, I always found at least 1, sometimes 2 cans filled with an assortment of chocolate diamonds, chocolate spritz cookies, chocolate chip cookies, butterhorns for my later enjoyment. Sometimes, in between trips, UPS would do a delivery. Once, while working in Indianapolis, my parents drove the delivery of 2 cans to me. Years later, when I would come home for any reason, I would first greet my parents and then head for the freezer. I always knew I would find a substantial amount of frozen chocolate chip cookies or chocolate diamonds. My mother would ask me, "What are you doing in the freezer?" And I would answer, "To get a cookie." She would reply, "Be careful you don't break a tooth. What about those on the table?" "I'll get to those later." I realized I focused mainly on desserts, but there was also Hungarian goulash, stuffed peppers, beef and noodle paprikash, kapusta to some, and of course many varieties of chicken. Everything in its proper measure will ensure a proper and successful outcome. We all understand my mom's life has been very challenging and difficult these last years. We should also realize that Mom's early life was also difficult. In August 1927, at the age of 2.5, in the space of 5 days, Mom's grandfather, father, and half-brother all died. Things got better in October of 1946. Mom went to a Yom Kippur night dance, and because a friend insisted that she accompany her. There she met my father, and they got married in 1947. Flora Rose Isenberg, Frau Rachel Bat Uriah Adel, daughter of Adolf and Ida Isenberg, was a librarian, a bookkeeper, and an avid member of the Skokie Valley Traditional Synagogue. She was in charge of the Judaica shop, a Sisterhood president, and a woman of valor. But to us, she was just Mom. She was the mother of 2, grandmother of 5, and great-grandmother of 7. She was loved by all her family and friends who knew her. I relate these things to you as a small window into my mother's life. The wholeness of one's life can be measured by the ingredients, the people, the recipes, the relationships, the groups that we form. The goodness of my mother's life will not be lost or forgotten. A prominent American, Vince Scully, in October of 2016, recently said, "Don't be afraid that it's over. Be happy that it happened. And I might add, be happy that you were part of it." On behalf of my mother, I thank all those who were part of her life. On behalf of me and my family, I thank my mother for being part of our lives. And our memories of our loved ones be a blessing for us every day. Rabbi.
We've just heard 3 beautiful eulogies honoring the memory of a mother and a grandmother. And perhaps what I'm going to add is, or try to add, is a framework within Jewish tradition and literature. And I'm going to go back then to the Eshet Chayil, which I chanted right before Jeremy's words. And as you can see, really, the verses, many of the verses in the Eshet Chayil, which many will sing on at the Friday night table, honoring the matriarch of the household and all women, really, in Jewish tradition and Jewish history, as you really can hear and I think see, and perhaps even more so after my brief words, you're going to see how applicable they are to the life led by Flora Isenberg, of blessed memory. Batach balev bala v'shala lo yachsar. We read at the beginning of the Eshet Chayil poem, her husband's heartfelt trust is in her, and he shall lack for nothing. Kamu vaneha vayashua bala vayhalala. And at the end we learn at the ultimate compliment that any wife and mother can have is her legacy. And that is, in other words, how are we speaking about her after she is gone? In Solomon's words, in translation, her children arise and they praise her, her husband, and he lauds her. And I think you just heard all of this from her children and grandchildren. Flora, as we know, was especially close with her family, as beautifully described by all, and that family was her top priority in life. Flora and Arnold raised children who not only loved and respected their parents, but each other as well, as we see that they worked as a team as best as distance can do so. Having been raised on Chicago's West Side, Flora was a graduate of Thule High School. She was a very loving daughter of Adolf, and is that Uriah? Or Aryeh? Uriah, yeah. And Ida Adel, both immigrants to the United States from Hungary. And maybe that's where she got the Hungarian goulash recipe from, that it's authentic. Flora met her beshert, Arnold, at a post-Yom Kippur dance in 1946, as was spoken about. They married the next year and were married for 57 years until Arnold passed away in 2004. In describing the world's first woman, Eve, Chava, the Torah uses the term Ezer Kenegdo, a helping partner. And Arnold and Flora, as we heard, were true partners in life. First starting out really with the business and her help to assist Arnold make sure that it's profitable. And then, of course, her mainstay at home in terms of raising the children and providing the wonderful, warm household that she did. She was an outstanding, caring, compassionate mother and extraordinary, as we say in modern Hebrew, Balat Habayit, a master of the house, but in Yiddish known as a balabusta, as we heard really about all of her cooking and all of the warmth that she had in her household. Flora and Arnold were the loving and dedicated, devoted parents of Alan and Alisa Isenberg and Barbara and Max Rose. There's the old saying of what goes around comes around, or some say what comes around goes around. And just as Flora took loving care of her children in recent years when she needed care, led by Barbara and her family and everybody's family, Alan's family, Max, etc., they gave her the same care in a kind and dignified manner. And Barbara really went into detail about really of what they did and how they did it and how fast they had to move, and making sure that she had the best care. I think this is highlighted also by Jeremy's walk. And as I was told, I think it was a week before she passed away, in terms of giving her this dignity of, letting her do what she can do, and her appreciation at no matter whatever level of cognition she was at. Flora and Arnold were blessed with the birth of 6 grandsons, and that was reinforced in terms of, genetically it's kind of interesting what happened. 6 grandsons and now 7 great-granddaughters. The 6 grandsons and their spouses, Adam and Stacy, Daniel and Miriam, Elliot and Stacy, Jeremy and Devin, and Zachary and Megan. Flora was also blessed to see and be a part of the lives of a 4th generation, as she was the proud and adoring great-grandmother of then 7 great-granddaughters, Jordan, Meira, and Elana, Taylor and Morgan, and Avery and Alexandria. As highlighted by Jeremy, Barbara, and Alan, all of Flora's children and grandchildren have so many beautiful memories of their mother and grandmother, and really we're very fortunate to have a grandmother in your life all the way up into adulthood. And, that's something that doesn't happen to many grandchildren, and you're very blessed to have been awarded, really, with the longevity of your grandmother. Solomon's Eshet Chayil, Woman of Valor, she was also industrious. Sophia halichot beita v'lechem atzlut lo tochal. She oversees the ways of her household and partakes not of the bread of laziness, as we heard. No one did this better than Flora. Along with Arnold, Flora built what we say in Hebrew, Bayit Ne'eman B'Yisrael, a household, a Jewish household filled with many Jewish traditions and values and customs. King Solomon's Eshet Chayil was a wise woman. Pia patcha b'chachma. Her mouth opens up with wisdom. And as we see, Flora was also a very wise woman who made many friends and described really the friends that she had for decades and how she really was the survivor of groups of her friends. She was a strong-willed woman who had firm opinions and was not afraid to speak her mind. And it sounds like there were some debates going on, friendly debates, which is good always to challenge each other as long as we hug at the very end. Torat Chesed al Lishona. King Solomon's Eshet Chayil was a kind woman. In translation, she exhibits kindness. As we heard, Flora was such a woman. She was kind, she was sensitive, she was loving and very generous. The Eshet Chayil of King Solomon was also known for her strength, both physically and emotionally, and also zest, love of life. Oz vehadar levusha vatischak liyom acharon. Strength and splendor are her raiment. She cheerfully awaits the last day. Like the Eshet Chayil, Flora was a strong, capable woman, and described very well that even after losing the love of her life, Arnold, although heartbroken, she still found great meaning in life and led a very fulfilling life until she became ill about 4 years ago. And I think that we have all the family members to thank for that she had something to live for each day, something to look forward to each day, and she was able really to enjoy nearly 2 decades without her beshert, without your father and without your grandfather Arnold, of blessed memory. Although small in stature, she was extremely strong, and most evidenced by Jeremy's walk that wore him out before it wore her out. And she drove until the age of 92. Flora was blessed with both what we say in Hebrew, a similar word but spelled differently. Arichut yamim, with an aleph, with the letter aleph, means length of days, longevity. She was blessed with many good years. And then arichut yamim, with an ayin, arichut means quality. She also really had a quality of life, and even at the end with her decline, the family and all the caregivers and everything ensured that she was respected and had the highest quality that one could have in the cognitive state that she was at. And finally, she was devoted to the Jewish people and the Jewish religion. As the poem starts, Eshet Chayil mi yimsa, woman of valor who can find. Flora, we know, was an extremely proud traditional Jew. They were, along with Arnold, founding members of Skokie Valley Synagogue, and as a builder in the construction business, Jeremy pointed out that Arnold was literally involved in the building of the physical structure of Skokie Valley, which decades later it looks like it remains very strong, driving by it, in terms of they built a strong building. Flora served in many capacities, including as the president of Skokie Valley Sisterhood, and very fittingly so was the recipient of the prestigious Woman of Valor Award, the Eshet Chayil Award. I'm going to share a poem, the refrain of a poem written by Chaim Nachman Bialik, European-born, and he moved to Israel before the state came about and lived then passed on the establishment of the state and really was very instrumental in many ways of bringing Hebrew and Hebrew literature back into modern day Israel. And he writes a poem that is called Acharei Moti, after my death. And this is the refrain. Acharei Moti siptu kacha li. After my passing, I want you to eulogize me in the following manner. Haya'ish ur'u. There was a person, and look, and behold, einenu od. They're no longer here. Kodam zmano meit ha'ish haza. Before their time, this person passed away. Vishirat chayav bi'emtza nifsaka. And the song of their life was abruptly interrupted. Bitzar, like the word tsuris, oi, woe. Od mizmor echad hayalo. This person had one more song inside of them. Vihine avad hamizmor la'ad, avad la'ad. And behold, this song is lost forever, lost forever. At this time, it is our role as Flora survivors to ensure her memory and legacy. We do so by continuing her song of life. One way that we do this is by incorporating into our own lives the many fine midot, character traits, virtues by which Flora led her life. Tehei nishmat Fradel Rachel bat Uriah ve'edel tzura b'tzror hachayim. May the neshama, the soul of Flora Isenberg, be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. If you would please rise, I'm going to now chant the memorial prayer, the Kelmalei Rachamim. In English translation, you'll find right under the 23rd Psalm in the pamphlet. El malei rachamim shochein pamromim hamtzeheim menucha nechona al kanvei ashchina b'ma'alot kedoshim u'tahorim kezoar harakia mazhirim et nishmat Faro Rachel bat Uriah shalcha li'olama ba'avur shanachnu mitpalalim bi'ad hazkarat nishmata Bigan Eden Tehei Menuchata Lachain Bal Harachamim Yastireha Beseter Knafav Leolamim Veyitzror Bitzrachai Menishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata Vitanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava V'nomar Amen. O God, full of compassion, you who dwell on high, grant proper repose on the sheltering wings of your presence in the lofty levels of the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the neshama, the soul of Flora Isenberg, who has gone to her world and for whose memory we pray. May her repose be in paradise. May the Master of compassion bring her under the cover of God's wings and bind her neshama, her soul, in the bond of life. May the Lord be her heritage, and may she repose on her resting place in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Be seated for a moment. This does conclude our service here in the chapel. Interment will take place immediately at the family plot at Shalom Memorial Park, just down the road, 1700 West Rand. Upon return from the cemetery, the family will be sitting Shiva at the Rose residence, both Thursday, Saturday evening, and Sunday. That address as well as those hours are available on the folders. That information is also on our website as well. Memorial contributions in Flora's memory can be made to Skokie Valley Agudath Jacob or to B'nai Israel congregation in Rockville. For those who are joining us in procession to the cemetery, one will be forming in the parking lot. Please make sure you obtain an orange funeral safety sticker to place on the inside windshield portion of your vehicle, as well as a magnetic flag to place on the roof of your car. Please make sure your high beams and your hazard lights are on at all times. Please drive as safely as safety permits. Try that again. Please drive closely to the car in front of you, especially as we go through intersections. The following individuals have been asked to serve as pallbearers. When I call your name, please rise and stand next to Mrs. Eisenberg's casket. Max Rose, Elliot Rose, Jeremy Viland-Rose, Zachary Rose, Devin Viland-Rose, Adam Isenberg, Daniel Isenberg, and Arthur Isenberg. At this time, I'd ask everyone to please rise as we escort the casket and the family from the chapel. Thank you so much.